Hello and welcome everybody on this cold and somewhat snowing Saturday morning on January 25th, 2014. This is Andrew Goldberg and John Iadavaya on NCAA Lax Gameday. We'd like to welcome everybody to the show today. We've got a great show scheduled. You can tweet at us at NCAA Lax Gameday, at Goldieberg, and at John_A_Iadavaya as always. And as I said, we have a great show. We'll have Coach Nadelen from Towson University on around 11:10, 11:15. And until we do, we'll have conference previews, wrapping up our conference previews from last week. We'll be doing the Patriot League, the ACC, the Big East, and the Ivy League. First off, John, how are you doing today?
Doing good. We're getting hit by the second of many polar vortexes, it seems. The high is not going to be more than 30 at all, but, getting ready for a big week here in New York. We got the Super Bowl coming up, but more importantly, we got the NHL Stadium Series tomorrow and Wednesday. Can't wait for those.
Yeah, the latest one is in LA this week, right?
Tonight we'll be at Dodger Stadium between the Anaheim Ducks and the Los Angeles Kings, and then tomorrow at Yankee Stadium, Devils Rangers, and then Wednesday Rangers Islanders. Get some outdoor hockey, see 0 degrees, people freezing in the seats, and get some old-fashioned hockey outside.
Yeah, it's actually shocking to me that they can even do it in LA. I don't know. I mean, granted, there's technology and everything. I just don't know how they can do all of that, in such a warm weathered place.
Well, funny story. They have done it before in the past. Back in 1991, in the parking lot of Caesar's Palace, they held an outdoor game between the Kings and the Rangers in 100-degree weather. Actually, it was funny because it actually worked. The ice was good, actually. The only problem they had during the game was that a swarm of locusts came onto the ice in the third period because they thought the rink was water and not ice.
A swarm of locusts? It sounds like something from the you remember the Yankee Cleveland Indian
Yes.
Playoff game a couple 5 years ago when Jabba Chamberlain was pitching, and just a huge swarm of I don't even know what they call it, gnats or something, just started swarming him.
Mm-hmm. All over the place. It was funny though because in the parking lot it was right next to a grass field, and that's where all the grasshoppers came from. So it was just very ironic how that happened. But luckily, no locusts should be coming. It's cold enough to kill all of them this week. So hopefully it will be a fun week of hockey, football, and lacrosse coming up. We got scrimmages starting currently. We had yesterday Hopkins and Georgetown scrimmaged. Today Hofstra's up at Syracuse. A few more other teams are getting ready, and then next week I think is women's lacrosse might be starting.
I think they already started. I saw a score come up that Syracuse beat the snot out of some no-name team 21-6 already.
Let me check. But I think you're actually right about that. I think the women's did start today, and then you also have Team USA tryouts right now down in Florida. So
right.
We have a lot of things going on.
Yeah, we do. It's a really exciting time for lacrosse. I know it starts, men's lacrosse officially starts the 1st. I think a lot more teams will play their games in about the middle of February, really, which is baffling to me considering the weather. I mean, I just feel like it's too cold for some of these games to even go on. I feel like there's just going to be mounds of snow that people are playing in. It's just ridiculous.
Before we start the Patriot League breakdown, I just saw something on Inside Lacrosse. Nikki Galasso will be sitting out in Syracuse's scrimmages today with a minor upper body injury. It's not supposed to be serious, but you hate seeing this again from Galasso suffering another injury. You wonder how he's going to, I guess, survive now this season, if he's going to play the full year.
Yeah, if I'm going to make a comparison today, He is essentially the Percy Harvin or Greg Oden of lacrosse. I mean, he is really uber talented like those guys, or maybe not so much Greg Oden, but he is so talented. He led the North Carolina in points, or at least was in the top like 3. His freshman year, he had about like 55 points, I believe. Then the next 2 years, he just gets hurt with foot and whatever other ailments, and then he transfers. I mean, you wonder if he's ever going to be the same. Do you think he plays this year?
He is going to play this year. The question is to what effect. I would say more maybe to Derrick Rose, where when this guy is at the top of his game, he's easily one of the best players in the nation. But just the constant injuries, man. I really do hope that he's not like the operation man when he's on the field, where like he's going around the cage and then it's like, oh, my arm fell off. I'll be back in a few minutes or something like that.
Yeah, it's really weird. But I mean, I'd love to see him play. I think he's a great player, and it's a real tragedy that he's not playing.
Yep. All right, shall we get started then?
Oh, yeah, let's do it. I mean, 4 great conferences here. We have, like I said, we'll start off with the Patriot League, then we'll go to the Big East, go to the Ivy League, and then the ACC. And in between that, we'll have Coach Nadelen on as our second guest of the show, which is very exciting for us. So, let's hit it right to the Patriot League. Patriot League adds Loyola this year, making it that much more difficult. Lehigh, of course, won the Patriot League the last 2 years, making it back-to-back. So now Loyola comes in and will most likely really push Lehigh this year. And I think you and I both can agree that Loyola is the top team in the conference this year.
I would disagree with that, I think that they're a top team in it, but I will say I think that it's going to be a dogfight between them, Bucknell, and Lehigh. I'm actually very favorable of Bucknell because they still return a lot of guys, especially on the back. And also, they have Shawn Doyle, who really last season was very well working behind the cage. He's one of the better playmakers in the conference, and quickly emerging as a very solid playmaker as well when he's got the ball in his stick. I think you look at them as a team that is dangerous not just on their defensive end, but really I see they have a very underrated offense that doesn't get enough attention.
We had David Dixon coming in at the midfield spot. He had 8 goals, 45 assists last year. And also they have freshmen in Thomas Filbati and Brock Gelfie. Both guys had 30 and 19 points respectively last year. And their attack unit is going to lose Chase Bailey from last year, who had 35 goals and 7 assists. But they do bring back Shawn Doyle, like you said, and Todd Heritage. So, I mean, their offense is strong. In terms of Lehigh, I mean, I think they should be strong as well, but they do lose David DiMaria, who led the team in points, 73. They do lose Dante Fantoni, who had 47 points last year, and a lot from their midfield unit. So, I mean, I don't know what Lehigh does to kind of offset the losses from last year.
Well, the thing also with Lehigh is that they were like Bucknell. They were a very balanced team, all like top to bottom, but their scoring was never consistent enough, in my opinion. I saw a game last year. They lost a bad game to UMass at home.
John, I want to cut you off because I think we have Coach on here. Hold on one sec.
All right, we'll get back to the Patriot League after we're done with that.
Yeah, Coach Nadelen.
Yes, sir.
How are you doing, Coach? This is Andrew Goldberg and John Iadavaya live on Live 365 on the Lacrosse Radio Network on NCAA Lax Gameday. Thank you for taking the time to join us during your busy season.
My pleasure. Just got done a little coaches clinic here at University of Maryland, so getting ready for the scrimmages down here today.
That's great. Me and John are both very high on you guys going into this year at Towson, and we believe you guys could be a dark horse. So talk about how you guys are handling the expectations going into this year.
So, for one, we appreciate your support. We're excited about that. And, the expectations aren't anything from, what we put on ourselves in the past. We were able to generate some success last year, which I think helped us be in a position for people to think that, we should be able to do some pretty good things this year. So, we've just gone about it as business as usual. Our biggest thing is continue to understand what level we should be able to play at, with our personnel and systems, being able to play at that level all the time. And that's our biggest challenge, kind of every day in practice and every game. So, we think we're talented enough to be able to be a national championship caliber team, and we just got to be able to prove it every day in practice.
Coach Shawn here. Just wanted to ask, I guess, describe the mentality of your team. You were a player at Towson, played for 4 years. You bring a good blue chip mentality. How do you guys try to do that, transfer that to your team and their play style?
I'm sorry, you're pretty broken up there for me. I couldn't understand what you were saying.
Sorry, let me repeat that. As I said, you bring a blue chip mentality to your team. How do you transfer that to the players, I guess, and how do you try and build off that in your third year?
I think you're talking about just kind of our mentality of the team and recruits and blue collar, and I think that's something that we've identified that's successful at Towson. The type of player that we like to have in our program, and the type of player that can make us successful. So we try to identify that in the recruiting, both locally and in and around the area of Towson. Unfortunately, we don't have to go too far. And the guys come in, they understand what's expected of them. Freshmen got to earn their stripes through that first semester. They don't have any gear that says Towson on it, so they're in the program, but they still got to understand really what it takes to be a Towson lacrosse player. So that's part of the process.
Coach, so I did a preview for you guys for In Lacrosse We Trust here. And I noticed, of course, you're losing Andrew Wiscavage last year, great goalie, who was honorable mention All-American. So, I mean, my biggest question, I guess, about you guys is replacing him this year in goal. I don't want to ask directly, who's winning the battle, but what have you seen from guys like Tyler White and Jake Graves and Ryan Adler as they compete this year in goal to replace Wiscavage?
I think you and I are on the same page. Your questions are the same as mine. Who's going to be that guy? But Tyler's done a good job. He came back from a torn knee injury. He missed all fall with regards to that, so he's coming back into form. I think he gains more confidence every day. He's got the most experience of the guys that we currently have. Freshman Matt Hoy has played very well throughout the fall. He's pushing with Tyler White right now to kind of be the first two guys out of the gate. And then Ryan Adler has done a decent job. Hasn't shown the consistency, but I'd say Tyler and Matt Hoy are kind of in a foot race right now.
Well, Coach, it does help that you do bring back two veteran long poles in John Feenessy and JoJo Ostrander. I guess talk about what are you looking for your defense this year. Obviously, your offense has a lot of returners, but what role do you hope your defense plays in this year's team?
Well, the defense has got to be able to help us as we kind of get our goalie set up, obviously within the whole team concepts. We got two veterans down there. We're young at the defensive midfield and long stick midi position again, so that can expose us just because those guys get picked on initially right off the bat. But we hope the experience with JoJo and John down there can really help us. They've helped so far in preseason, keeping the young guys calm and hopefully growing together as a unit and understanding their roles instead of just being overwhelmed. So it's we're expecting big things from those guys this year.
Coach Nadelen, obviously you guys are playing in the CAA this year, And as I mentioned before, me and John are very high on you guys this year, especially in the tournament. Now that Penn State has been kind of, I don't want to say forced not to compete, but they've been eliminated from competing in the actual tournament at the end of the year, which means, most likely they'll be in the automatic bid. I don't know how much say, I guess, you coaches have in the decision of kind of bumping Penn State out. But what was it like, I guess, to maybe learn that Penn State wasn't exactly – I mean, obviously you're going to compete against them. Records still stand. But you're not going to compete against them in the tournament. And then also the decision process that the conference went in terms of, penalizing them for moving to the Big Ten.
Penn State's obviously a terrific team. We were fortunate to knock them off in the CAA championship game last year after they beat us in the regular season. They returned, a great goalie. But we, as coaches, had nothing, in regards to a say or dealing with the CAA's decision. The CAA conferences, has set a precedent and standard to have done that in basketball and football and other sports to not allow teams that are leaving to compete for their conference championship if they're in the CAA for another year. So that was just, I guess something that came across, and unfortunately for Penn State, they have to deal with it. I'm sure that gives them a little bit more ammo during the regular season coming against all the CAA opponents. So we got to prepare for a little bit more firepower from them against us. And
Coach, you played in this conference, third year coaching in this conference. Everyone knows that the CAA can be a crapshoot usually. Just how difficult is it to predict and prepare for, I guess, the coming and goings of conference play between all the teams with UMass, Hofstra, Delaware, Drexel?
Coach? Seems as if we lost Coach Nadelen there. Hopefully he'll call back. Must have gotten in a weak spot there. But I mean, what do you take away from that interview, John? In case he tries calling back.
Well, I think he has a similar mindset with us. He probably humbled that they won last year, but knows that this season presents another challenge to itself. The defense has got to be big as the new goaltender, whoever it might be, prepares and gets comfortable in between the pipes. And I think that might be an area they have to be most concerned about. If we get him back, I don't know if we will. Wanted to ask him about how the faceoffs are going. That was another area that they struggled with last year. But if they have the ball, Towson's going to be in good shape with the returning midfielder that combined for over 40 goals that comes back. Not to mention Thomas DiNapoli, who's arguably one of the best players with the ball in his stick this year. Very dynamic players up front that can make things happen, and their defense that, when it's on its game, can really frustrate the opposition.
Yeah, and I think that he was kind of on point with both of us and their concerns in the fact of who replaces Wiscavage in goal, which is obviously a big deal because you and I both know that if you have a hot goalie, he can erase a lot of the defensive mistakes and turn certain goals, goals that look like it's going to go 100% in, and turn them into breaks going the other way and scoring opportunities for your team. So I think that is interesting going forward. So it doesn't look like we will probably get Coach Nadelen back. I don't know what exactly happened, but maybe we'll call him back on our break. But as we look at the Patriot League, and before we do that, I just want to thank Coach Nadelen for taking the time to interview with both of us. Great interview, Coach Nadelen. For those of you who are listening, definitely watch Towson play this year. As we had mentioned multiple times in our interview, we're very high on them this year in the CAA, and we think they could be at least a dark horse for the NCAA tournament. So as we get back to the Patriot League here, how do you see things shaking out?
Oh, as I've mentioned before on the show, 9 teams in this conference is one too many, in my opinion, and you have to wonder how the conference is going to shape out going forward, if they might go to divisions or not, especially with more change on the way in the college landscape, if a 10th team might get added. BU, don't forget, Boston University begins its first year in collegiate lacrosse. I think they're going to be fighting for the bottom with Holy Cross. I'm just not confident in Navy right now. Rick Soul's got to figure out a formula that makes Navy work. I think that Army is going to beat out Colgate though, and Lafayette for that fourth spot. And really in the conference in the Patriot League, I feel Army's always a contender, just because how they are. They bring back John Gleesner, honorable All American, beginning of the season, the preseason inside lacrosse. I didn't get to see him in the fall when I was at West Point, but believe me, I've seen him in his freshman year last year. He's a big guy, not as big as Stool, but very creative with the ball and makes that offense work. And they've got some small guys that are very quick that can be pretty effective dodgers. And they still bring back one of the top 5 defenses in the nation from last year. And one of the biggest things as well with Army, they also have a face-off guy now that can actually compete with the best. So I would say do not sleep on Army in this conference. But otherwise, I think shaping out, it's going to be Bucknell, Loyola, and Lehigh to beat, though.
Yeah, I think we can agree that the top 3 is definitely Loyola, Bucknell, Lehigh. Personally, I don't know if the thing that's worrying me in terms of Lehigh is just who's going to supplant them. The losses they had on attack where they lose 2 seniors, they lose a full line of midfielders that were heavy in points. So I'm just, it's not that I'm questioning Coach Cassis's ability to coach, obviously. He's a great coach. He's brought Lehigh, the program, a very long way. But I could definitely see them, if they don't hit their potential, I guess, I could definitely see them, being somewhere in the 4 to 6 range with Army and Colgate. It's unfortunate that Navy has kind of fallen off the map these past couple years. I think they can right the ship, no pun intended there, but I think they can. It might just take another couple recruiting classes there. But in terms of 1 through 9, Loyola comes in at 1 for me, then Bucknell. I think maybe Army squeezes in at 3, Lehigh 4, Colgate 5, Navy 6, Holy Cross 7, Lafayette. Actually, I'll put Lafayette at 7, Holy Cross at 8, and then Boston University in their first year rounds out the conference at the bottom.
That's a fair assessment. I will be interested to see how this conference does go for a while. I don't think that Loyola is going to be a big player on the national stage, but they'll be a tough team no matter what, especially in this conference.
Right. So, we're done with the Patriot League, and before we hit a break, we'll look at the Big East right now. The Big East, to me, is an interesting conference. Denver, even though they're all the way in the Mountain West, joins the Big East this year from the ECAC conference, and Marquette also joins this year. So that means it's Denver, St. John's, Villanova, Georgetown, Providence, Rutgers, and Marquette in the conference. How much of a shot do you give St. John's at maybe overtaking Denver this year?
Before I get to that, from this point on, let it be known that the Big East will be known as the Big East Conference 2.0, as it should be right now, considering the big changes that have gone on with the conference in all sports. Right. As for the question itself, I think St. John's actually has a good chance of beating Denver. Seeing them for the past year or so, they look like they're ready for that program that's built up to this point, and they're just ready to let it all out right now. With that attack, with McCardle, Cernuto, and Keegan, as well as some good defensive players, midfield players that can really be a good complement, as well as a very underrated rope unit, I will say. They're very fast, speedy. Chop at the stick, chop at your hands when you got the ball. I would not underrate that. The problem to me with St. John's, where they might stumble to a team like Denver, or maybe stumble throughout the year, is going to be in their backfield when it comes to their close defense and discipline. When I saw them in the fall, they were very, very loose, They were very wild when they were playing against West Point, and then when it got out of hand against West Point, they were starting still a little fights, I would say, or playing very overly aggressive. I would say their defense or close defense is similar to Albany in a way, but not in the sense of high risk, high reward in terms of causing turnovers, though. They just need to be better organized on the defensive end. And don't forget also, they have to bring in a new goaltender as well as their longtime starter, Logan, I think it was, is gone this year.
Right. They have Harry Burke, the sophomore out of Hillsborough, New Jersey, Andrew Boyer, senior out of Pottstown, Pennsylvania, and freshman Joseph Danaher out of Massapequa Park, New York. Looking at who comes back there then in the goal, who do you see would overtake, grab that starting spot?
Um,
Does it go to the veteran and the senior in Andrew Boyer? I mean, he didn't really see. He actually didn't see that much time last year. Harry Burke saw the most time last year.
You know what it is? I'm trying to remember who exactly what. I'm trying to put a face to the name where the goalies I saw at West Point in the fall. I had the first goalie. I think it was Burke. The sophomore might have played the best of them. I think Burke has the edge from what I saw, but again, I'm just not sold right now on that backfield. Again, I think they can beat Denver, and I think they can. If this is the year, this is the year to win the conference. It's just that they've got to make sure now they've got like the ship built that the holes don't start springing up and that they're able to fix them quickly.
Yeah, and I mean, Denver has the name brand now in terms of, the last, I would say, 4 or 5 years ever since. I mean, I know Bill Tierney, the longtime Princeton coach, went there, I'd say probably 7, 8 years ago, but over the last 4 or 5 years, they've been really, really good, including the Final Four run they made. I guess my biggest question, if there really is one about Denver, is how they replace Eric Law. He had 78 points for them last year, 43 goals, 35 assists. He was kind of the man back there in the attack. And also, how do they replace Chase Carraro at the midfield, their face-off guy?
Yep.
Those are 2 big losses for me. And Eric Law, also in the MLL, was basically the best rookie last year outside of Logan Shush and Rob Pennell. So I think they do take a step back in terms of overall play, even though they do bring back guys like Wes Berg and Eric Adamson.
And also Jeremy Noble's back as well as
Right.
remember they also did the 2 goalie system last year, and Jamie Faust and Ryan LaPlante, and both goalies really. I mean, to be honest with you, it's a good problem to have for Coach Tierney in the fact that both goalies, if he wanted to stick with one of them the whole game, he could. Both of them are capable of winning if he wanted to.
Yeah, so that's an interesting thing that I would like to ask you about is that they've kind of done this ever since they got both guys, LaPlante and Faust. Faust was drafted this year in the MLO draft by Denver, coincidentally. And do you go by the thought that I know in football, if you have 2 quarterbacks, you don't have one. That's what I've heard, longtime football coach John Madden say. Do you think the same thing applies in Denver? If you have 2 goalies, that doesn't mean you have one, and you're kind of just playing with a little fire there?
Completely disagree with that when it comes to lacrosse or even hockey, for example. I mean, you see it a bunch of times in these sports where you just have 2 good goalies. And you just gotta figure out a thing. The issue though is when it comes to goalies need to get into a system. They need to feel rhythm with streaks, games, and shots. That's the only thing that they've got to be careful about. But I do feel that that both of them, because remember what they did last year is they split the halves. That's how they did it. And remember, Tierney got a lot of criticism last year when he switched the goalies up, and Denver ended up losing the game. I think it was against Cornell in the semifinal. But I mean, he's done this all season, so what are you supposed to do? Really, it's it's just how they do it, and that's how they have to work with it.
Yeah, and I mean, just one last quick note here. I mean, my last year at Drew, we split goalies over the last 4 or 5 games, and I mean, just from a personal standpoint, it it was just kind of hard knowing exactly, when you were playing, really getting into a rhythm. Because, especially a guy coming in the second half, we'd also switch starts too. So if you had a guy coming in the second half, it was kind of like, a different mindset. The rest of the players are all warmed up and ready to go, and here you are coming fresh off the bench, seeing your first shot. I mean, it's just tough, and I think that speaks a lot about how both Faust and LaPlante can both come in off cold starts and just, play very well. I think that's a strong thing for Denver as well. Yeah, go for it.
I was going to say a team for me to watch this year in the Big East is going to be Georgetown. I like what Kevin Warren did last season. I saw the battle of Bethpage between them and St. John's, and I'm still saying it right now that if Georgetown did not beat St. John's, the Red Storm would have made it to the tournament, and I think might have made the finals with the run that they were on, considering they beat Hofstra and Notre Dame in back-to-back games. But Georgetown, Kevin Warren, a Hofstra guy, very blue-collar type of play. Georgetown just never, in the games I saw, they just never gave up, played hard-nosed lacrosse, even took Syracuse hard, remember, in that low-scoring 6-5 game where they almost upset them. I really like what they bring back. I think that they're going to be someone to look for. I mean, they lose Zach Guy as well as Como, but they have guys like Riley O'Connor, 26 goals, 30 assists. Their faceoff guy was very good, though, and Kyler Narr, 62% at the X. Goaltending needs to get a little better, though, with Jake Haley. But their polls, though, I will say, they were actually quite aggressive.
Yeah, my only question is in terms of who they lost last year. They lost a lot on midfield and attack. Most notably, I guess, for me is Travis Comu and Zach Guy. Both guys had 23 and 22 points. Granted, they do bring back O'Connor and McCormick, like you said, who were the top goal scorers. Do you see, like, any of those four guys really hurting them? In terms of their departure?
You see, my thing with Georgetown is the problem for me with Georgetown is that with when they went through that transition year between the two coaches, I think it really did hurt them. Towards the end of their old coach, I feel terrible for forgetting his name, but
yeah, Coach Urich.
Yeah, Coach Urich. During the last few years of Urich, I feel that Georgetown was starting into a transitional year. They should have made the tournament in 2010, and since then, those two guys, they were go-to guys, but they just never, I guess, made it to the next level. And obviously, as seniors under Coach Kevin Warren, they can only do so much. So I feel they were good, but they never could get to that next level. But I feel now that with Warren now firmly entrenched in Georgetown now has a sense of direction, that those guys may be able to step up finally.
Right, and I could agree with you with that. I think Georgetown's starting to go on the up and up, and in the next year or two, I think we'll see them get back to their rightful place in the national conversation in terms of lacrosse and being a national power again. So before we hit a break here and preview the ACC and Ivy League after the break, how do you see this conference shaking out in 2014?
I think we both have said Denver, St. John's are the two sharps in this. Not to say that the rest of the conference basically they're going to eat alive. I think it's going to be a conference similar to the CAA now in terms of some teams are a little more blue collar from 4 to 7, where they're going to have to like fight and scrap their way for wins. In terms of like Marquette, Georgetown, and Providence in a way. But I think the talent of Denver and St. John's is going to make those two be the top two. And as I said, St. John's, I think, can beat Denver, but I think Bill Tierney wins in his first year in this new conference.
Yeah, I agree with you with Denver and St. John's being, 1 and 2 at the top. It may be closer than we both I think it'll be closer than a lot of people think at the top. I'll go with Villanova 3, and I'll actually go with Rutgers at 4. I was really impressed with them when I saw them play Hopkins and UMass and Fairfield in the Johns Hopkins tournament in the fall. One player that we should note at Rutgers is faceoff man Joe Nardella. He's from Strong Island, baby, up by you, and he's actually one of the more underrated faceoff men in the nation. I mean, once you get past Massa and Fowler, he's the third best guy. He won nearly 61% of his faceoffs last year, I think, and he was only a sophomore. So I think he's a name to watch, and I think he'll help them propel them in this conference, similar to a way in what Massa does at Bryant.
Mm-hmm.
And then to round it out, I think I'll go with Georgetown, Providence, and then Marquette to finish in last, unfortunately.
All right.
So let's hit a break here, and then we'll preview the next two conferences, the Ivy League and then the ACC. So here we go. We'll be back after this advertisement from YouTube.
Kitchen Counselor, it's likely your detergent. Cascade Platinum's triple cleaning formula delivers brilliant shine. Finish gel can't beat. It even helps keep your dishwasher sparkling. Cascade Platinum is Cascade's best.
Come to decide that the things that I tried for in my life is to get high on. When I sit alone, come get a little known, but I need more than myself this time. Step from the road to the sea to the sky, and I do believe that we rely on. When I lay it on, come get to play it on, all my love to sacrifice. Hey, oh, listen what I say, oh, I got your hey, oh, now listen what I say, oh. When will I know that I really can go to the well one small time to decide on? When it's killing me, when will I really see all that I need to look inside? Come to believe that I better not leave before I get my chance to ride. When it's killing me, what do I really need? All that I need to look inside. Hey, oh, listen what I say, oh, come back and hey, oh, look at what I say, oh, the more I see, the less I know, the more I like to let it go. Hey, oh, whoa, people need the cover of another perfect wonder where it's so white as snow. Laterally divided by a world so undecided, and there's nowhere to go. In between the cover of another perfect wonder, and it's so white as snow. Running through the field where all my tracks will be concealed, and there's nowhere to go. Oh! When to descend to amend for a friend of the channels that have broken down. Now you bring it up, I'm gonna ring it up just to hear you sing it out.
Welcome back, everybody, to NCAA Lax Gameday. You can tweet at us, as we mentioned at the beginning of the telecast, at NCAA Lax Gameday, at Goldieberg, and at John_A_Iadavaya. We'd like again to thank Coach Nadelen. Coach Nadelen. Sorry, I had Joe Nardella still on the mind. Coach Nadelen from Towson for coming on and giving us a great interview. And he actually had to get ready for scrimmages, but we'd like to extend our sincerest thanks and good luck this season, as we have high hopes for them going into 2014. So as we continue our conference previews, next up is the Ivy League. And personally, John, how I see the Ivy League is kind of like everyone just beats the living crap out of each other. And it's just very tough. A lot of defense, a lot of low scoring games, a lot of tight games as well, especially with a team like Penn in there who led the nation last year in scoring defense. I don't think there's a lot separating teams 1 through 5 in this conference.
I would agree with that. We've agreed before that Princeton is the team to beat. We don't know what Cornell is going to be this year. I said that I wouldn't be shocked if they end up missing the tournament due to the massive loss of leadership over the offseason. And then you got a team like Yale, who's won the Ivy League 2 years in a row, and yet still not considered the favorite. I mean, you look at them, what they bring back. Mangan's back on attack, but a lot of holes to fill though in the backfield. They're still trying to figure that out even right now. So you don't know how they're going to become the end of the season. And then you got Harvard and Brown to me with Penn. I mean, we can agree that Dartmouth is, I guess, the sacrificial lamb of this conference right now until they
Yeah.
can get together. But I mean, those three between Penn, Harvard, and Brown are really, I think those are the swing teams going to the season. Anything could happen, between those three.
Yeah, and I agreed with you when we opened our show NCAA Lax Gameday, a while back. I think we both when we were covering the scandal and how it kind of all went down, and in terms of the players they lose too, John. I mean, don't forget that these guys lose some really really good players. Rob Pennell was the Player of the Year last year. He also broke Matt Danowski's scoring record for all-time points in a career. Last year as well. And they also lose Steve Mock, who had 60 goals last year as a senior attackman. And they lose Max Van Borgondian. I totally butchered his name, but I mean, he had 43 points last year. And you also lose Connor English. He had 25 points. So I think there was not only do they lose their head coach and they had the whole scandal, but they also lose a lot of talent on offense. And like we said, I don't think it's very hard to imagine them not making the tournament this year, which is actually shocking because they're a top program in the nation.
Yep, I look at Harvard as a team. I was talking about the swing teams. Is if they can finally get their act together, put it together top to bottom, they could be a dangerous team. I mean, how long have they been stocking WMDs basically for so long, and how long before they actually are useful? Don't forget that a reason why Harvard struggled last year because of that scandal that rocked the athletics, the school actually, where I think it was like a few hundred kids or something were expelled for cheating on exams, and the athletics, all the teams got affected by a few players, and Harvard lost a bunch of depth players actually because of it.
Really, I actually didn't hear about that. I
Oh
don't know
yeah,
why. Maybe because I was in a hole somewhere under a rock, but I just didn't hear about that.
oh yeah, it was bad. I mean, Harvard. The news came and went, but I mean, at the time when it was announced, it was like, oh my gosh, it was crazy. I think Harvard only lost like 2 starters though out of it though at the midfield, but I mean, again, look at their team from top to bottom. They have like a kid like Devin Dwyer who had 16 goals, 27 assists. Senior Garrett Campbell, who's pretty good on defense. Joe Petrucci, who's played every game almost in his career. A great shutdown defender in the conference. I mean, they've got the personnel. It's just, can they finally turn that corner and actually, become a solid team that's going to be, a challenger in the Ivy for years to come?
Yeah, and just to look at how much of different the Harvard season could have been last year in 2013. I mean, they had a lot of close losses. They lost to UMass to start the year by 2 goals, 8-6. They lost to Brown 11-9. They lost to Duke by 1, 12-11. They lost to Cornell 14-12. They did beat Penn 8-7. They got blown out by Princeton, but they lost to Yale in the final game of the season 11-10. So, the ball bounces their way a couple of times differently, and they could very well be in the tournament last year. I mean, who really knows? My biggest question, I guess, for them is who do they put in goal? because they lose Harry Krieger last year, who saw all the playing time outside of very little where Jake Gambitsky saw it, the sophomore, now junior. So who replaces him, in your opinion? Is it Gambitsky or Moore?
I think it's going to be more. That's just my gut feeling, I would say. Look, another team like Harvard, though, is Brown. And don't forget, when they went on that run in 2009, they were surprised a lot of people. And last year, like Harvard, they could have made the tournament. I feel, or at least the conference tournament, but a few things didn't go their way. For example, they started all out of the gate 5-1, and then lost 4 straight to North Carolina, Princeton, Penn, and then Yale, and then just never recovered from there. They've lost their main conference contributors, but they still bring back a pretty solid attack unit with Henry Blind and Sam Huster. Both of them combined for 49 goals, 16 assists. It's just, how are they going to replace the defense with a lot of youngsters? Their goaltending, I think, is going to be fine. They've got 2 guys competing for it, but from all reports, it seems like both guys are good competitors, and that shouldn't be the problem. It's just going to be who's going to be able to cover assignments on the long poles.
Yeah, because looking at their team, their offense is pretty young, I guess you would say. They do, like you said, they do lose Sherman, they lose Jones, and they lose DePeters, but those guys, were kind of towards the middle of the pack in terms of their scoring output from last year. Obviously, they do bring back Henry Blinn, who's now a sophomore attackman. Sam Herster is now a senior. But looking at the rest of the conference, I think Penn is an interesting team this year. They do lose their top scoring guy in Tim Schwalze, who had 42 points last year, and they do lose their top defenseman, Anthony Santomo. Both guys were honorable mention All-Americans last year. My biggest question, and I guess the biggest question always with Penn, is where are the goals going to come from? Because their defense is going to be airtight.
Yes, we know that. It seems like that's always been the case with Penn since they emerged. They're ranked 11th, by the way, in Inside Lacrosse's face-off yearbook. To me, they're always there, but they just cannot. I'm sounding like a broken record as I say put it together, but it's true. It's so true, though. And Penn needs goals from someone, or else they just can't work. They've got the backfield, they've got the defense, but who is going to put the ball in the back of the net when push comes to shove?
Right. They do have Zach Losko. He returns as the team's top point guy. I agree with you wholeheartedly. You do sound like a broken record, but just because it's true, like, all these teams could make the tournament or could be good, but the ball bounces not their way in some of these games, and they find themselves kind of hovering around a 500 mark or outside on some games when they should have won. They do play teams very tough, but I think looking at the outlook this year, it's hard to say that Princeton will not win this conference, I guess, for me.
Yeah, that's the thing with those 3 teams, Penn, Harvard, and Brown, is that there's just no wiggle room. You lose a game in this conference, and it's like you have playing with 2 lives in Super Mario World. If you lose one, it's like, okay, I've got another. You lose 2, I'm in serious danger. You lose 3, you're done, basically.
Yeah, 3-strike rule.
3, exactly. You lose 3 in this conference, and your chances of making the tournament are on a thread at worst, and 4 is automatically you're not making it.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. It's going to be Princeton and everyone else. How Yale comes together this year will determine if they can make another run at a 3-peat. I'm gonna stand by the bold prediction and say Cornell does not make the tournament this year, though. I think I'll stay by it and say that Brown makes it with Yale, Princeton, and I'll go with Penn over Harvard because at least Penn is more of a complete team right now than the Crimson. But in the end, it's going to be Tommy Schreiber leading the way for Princeton into the NCAA tournament with the automatic qualifier.
Yeah, and I agree with you there. I think Princeton's undoubtedly the number 1 team, especially with Tom Schreiber at the midfield and then Mike McDonald at attack. And then in terms of in the preseason coaches poll here, they have Princeton, Cornell, Yale, Penn, Harvard, Brown, Dartmouth, which is interesting. I'm on the bandwagon, as we mentioned earlier when we came back from break, in saying that Cornell will definitely have their struggles this year, and I see them actually being out of the top 4. I would go with Princeton, then Yale. Yale brings back a lot of talent. Mangan, short stick D midi Harry Kucharzik, as well as defenseman Jimmy Kraft. And then they also have Dylan Levings at the faceoff. So they do have talent this year. Then I go Penn 3, Harvard 4, Brown 5, Cornell 6. Yeah, I guess Cornell. Cornell 5, Harvard or Brown 6, and then Dartmouth is just everyone's little sister that they beat up on.
Yeah, basically. So about time to get to the ACC.
Yeah, my boys, Maryland, baby. I'm a homer, but Maryland. Let's get to the ACC. The ACC, in my opinion, and I guess you'll agree with me, is going to be the best conference this year in terms of the actual teams. But in terms of records, it'll probably look like everyone just has like records that are really bad this year in conference. Just because there's just so much talent in this conference. You have Syracuse, who comes from the Big East, along with Notre Dame, to join forces with Duke, North Carolina, Virginia, and Maryland.
It's the group of death. Let's just say it.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the soccer group of death.
And honestly, would it be a shock, which it shouldn't be for anyone, that all 6 teams at the end of the season make the tournament, or at least in the top 15 in the nation ranked?
It wouldn't shock anyone, or it shouldn't shock anyone. My only thing is that with them playing each other so much and the talent in this conference, I would see at least 2 teams not making the tournament just because they're beating up on each other.
Ooh, that I'll be honest, if the only 2 teams to me that would have a shot of not making the tournament are Virginia and Maryland. But even then, I find it hard not to put Maryland in, just because they still return everyone at least defensively. To me, Maryland is going to play similar to Penn this year. They've got everything in the backfield. We know what they're going to be able to do is stop the ball. But can they score is the problem. And don't forget, even the guys they lose from last year weren't really the best offensive players, don't forget, as well. And that's going to be Maryland's problem, I think, is just creating offense and finding out who's going to be able to put the ball in the back of the net. You know, losing Chuck, for example, I think that's going to be a bigger loss than they realize at the midfield.
Well, don't they bring Chuck back, or do you get injured?
Oh, wait, you're right. I'm sorry.
Yeah, they do bring back Chuck. They do lose like Owen Bly and Cooper.
I'm thinking of Bly then and Cooper. I'm sorry. I forgot that Chuck got drafted and wasn't in the NFL. Yeah, those 2. So it's basically Chuck all by himself on the midfield right now with those 2 gone. Bly was an underrated guy, really, that teams didn't really focus on him, obviously, but you know, he got those like good secondary goals, provided good scoring when the main guys were shut down. And then Virginia, I think that they'll have a bounce back season, but to what degree though, especially in this newfound conference where, don't forget, we're going to have our first automatic qualifier at last for these teams.
Oh, right, because they only had 4 teams last year. Just to piggyback on the Maryland comment real quick before we look at the rest of the conferences, you mentioned their airtight D, just to give our listeners perspective on how good this defense is in terms of the preseason all-conference poll from the coaches. 3 of the 4 guys on defense are Maryland guys. So you have Mike Earhart, Maryland, Goran Murray, Maryland, Nico Amato, Maryland. The only guy who wasn't on that list from Maryland, who isn't on Maryland, is Scott McWilliams from Virginia. So their defense is going to be stout, like you said. In terms of the offense, they do bring in a lot of talent. Obviously, they bring in the number 1 recruiting class. I kind of agree with you with the Penn comment. I think it's just more of it's not that they don't have talent. It's just they don't have the experience, and they won't know exactly what they're getting from all those great freshmen that they're getting.
That's fair. That's a fair thing to say. I mean, the freshmen I think are going to make an impact, but I mean, I just don't I can't see the freshmen right away. Actually, yeah, let me take that back. There is one freshman I think that will make an immediate impact and could be up for Rookie of the Year. Is the one from Shawn, Wading River. Um,
Rotans.
Yes, Rotan, Rob
Yeah.
Rotan. He was phenomenal for them. Literally was just a man amongst boys playing last year on Long Island in Class C. And I think he will definitely be a difference maker for Maryland this year. In terms of just overall, though, the freshman class, to have like 4 or 5 different freshmen stepping up, though, I don't know. But again, it's
Yeah,
the
it's tough.
ACC. I wouldn't be shocked, honestly. And as I said before about Virginia, I think they have the returning pieces in place where they can make a strong bounce back. Don't forget, Rob Emery finally comes back for his 6th year. Mark Cockerton returns on the attack, and they got the other, they got the younger Pinnell brother as well there, as well as on defense with Scott McWilliams. The question again is, to what level can they bounce back now? And I feel that they're one of the weaker teams in this group of depth.
Yeah, and they do bring back LaPierre as well, which is humongous for them, actually, just from a talent standpoint at the midfield as well. To make quick notes of North Carolina, Duke, and Syracuse, I mean, Syracuse is just loaded, man. I think they're going to be great this year. North Carolina was very impressive against Ohio State when I saw them play in the fall ball tournament. They're really experienced. They bring back a lot of offense. Jimmy Bitter, and then Chad Tutton, and of course Joey Sankey going to lead the way this year. I mean, that guy is short, but he can just finish anywhere. Zero angle, he'll finish on a guy. And then Duke, obviously, they're the national champs, and it's actually funny when you look at it. Duke may not even be the top team in their conference this year.
That's honestly funny, but again, I see Duke's gonna play out like they always do with Danowski. They'll struggle through February as they try to get everything together, and then they'll tear through March and April like a buzzsaw through wood. Honestly, that's what I've just come to expect with Duke. But again, as I mentioned in the beginning of the show, Galasso, if he can stay healthy, Syracuse is going to be a very dangerous offense, which really has not been the case for a long time with Desco. Honestly,
Right.
since 2008, actually, I would say since '08, their offense has not been good. And
Yeah.
I think if you asked him straight up, he would be honest with you. It hasn't been the offenses of the Syracuse of old when they had the Powells, for example. But I think this year, considering what they bring back and the experienced youth that they have up top, they're going to be dangerous. But their goaltending, since the fall of John Galloway, since he graduated, how
Yeah.
far has fallen.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely tough defensively for them. They were just so good defensively in those first couple of years with Galloway and Lade and McGill and, the Long Tree defense or whatever they considered themselves. But with 1 minute here, how do you see the conference shaking out?
I don't know. I just keep saying to myself, you know what? Maybe this is the year North Carolina does it. Maybe this is the year North Carolina does it. Last year, I think, was the year. I think they'll finish third or fourth. To me, it's going to be Duke, Syracuse, Notre Dame, and I'll say Virginia over North Carolina this time, and then UNC, Maryland is how I see it. And we haven't even mentioned Notre Dame as much. Just quickly, same defense, good. John Kemp back. They have offense that can score finally. Not high numbers, but they can get clutch goals.
Yeah, and they have a guy like Kavanaugh, too, who's going to be a player to watch. So my quick rundown is I'll agree with you. Duke, Syracuse. Actually, I'll go Syracuse, Duke. I'm going to go North Carolina. Actually, I like their talent a lot that they bring back. As we had said, they're kind of like the Ted Mosby of How I Met Your Mother for lacrosse. And then I'm going to go Notre Dame, Virginia, and unfortunately my boys from Maryland are going to have to settle for a last place finish. But we'd like to thank everybody for listening to NCAA Lax Game Day, and of course Coach Nadelen from Towson for joining us again. Everybody, if you're in the Northeast, I hope you're evading this little snow shower we're getting. and of course the second coming of the polar vortex. And join us next week as we kind of look ahead to the beginning of lacrosse season. So have a good day, everybody.
See ya.